Warhammer is getting a new fantasy tabletop RPG. Is Hasbro stumble Games Workshop's gain?
You done messed up, Aaron!
It was another big weekend for Games Workshop as the British games publisher launched their latest game, Warhammer The Old World. This new game is a relaunched version of Warhammer Fantasy, but set in an earlier time period, a new streamlined rule set, and a mix of mostly old but a few new miniatures. As part of the game launch, Cubicle 7 also announced they were working on Warhammer The Old World tabletop RPG, a game that will be distinct from but won't replace their Warhammer Fantasy tabletop RPG line. Now, if you don't follow Warhammer stuff much, Warhammer The Old World was born from the ashes of Warhammer Fantasy, the much beloved but increasingly niche fantasy wargame. Warhammer Fantasy was Games Workshop's first Warhammer game and featured huge armies of characters marching in ranks against each other. The game eventually fell out of favor and was replaced by Age of Sigmar, but fan demand kept Warhammer Fantasy alive, along with games like Total War Warhammer.
You must face these demons.
That led to Games Workshop deciding to revisit its Warhammer Fantasy setting with Warhammer The Old World, which has now launched to more success than I think anyone had thought of. But this wasn't the only good news for Warhammer fans, because this morning, Games Workshop also announced that they had dealt with a scalping issue that plagued the release of their pre-sale for the limited edition version of the Horus Heresy finale novel, with the now freed up stock going back on sale this week. It was a rare win for fans who have long been plagued by scalping for years, with limited edition products such as these novels getting snatched up by bot users and then resold for a massive profit. It's not very often that the average consumer wins one, but here we go. Now, this weekend's news continues a strong start to 2024 for Games Workshop. They have a hot new game driven by nostalgia that is doing much better than anyone expected. They are seen as a hot brand by more and more mainstream sources. There's, of course, the Amazon Studios deal, but also Call of Duty is rumored to have a Warhammer 40k crossover coming soon. And they're doing great financially. They've not only experienced record sales that resulted in big profit-sharing bonuses for everyone at the company, and we mean everyone, all their employees get access to some of those big profits. They are considering building another new factory to make sure they can meet all the demand for the company. Now, we're not going to say that Games Workshop is a perfect company. There are a lot of people who have a lot of issues with their business model, and we're not here to debate it. But we can compare it to another big game company. That is, of course, Hasbro, the one that just laid off a huge chunk of its workforce and is trying to release its biggest tabletop RPG project of the year, the 2024 D&D Core Rulebooks, in a crowded marketplace that is partially of its own making. Last year's OGL debacle spurred a lot of publishers into action, and now all those publishers are also releasing rulebooks that are going to compete with the D&D 2024 Core Rulebooks. We're talking about the likes of Pathfinder 2e Remastered, Daggerheart, the MCDM RPG, Stormlight Archive, which, to be fair, has nothing to do with the OGL, but hey, that's probably coming out this year, and even more. We can't help but notice that Warhammer The Old World's new RPG, it's one more fantasy RPG lining up to compete with it. And also, what do you think will hit screens first, that D&D TV show or the Warhammer 40k TV show? Now, obviously, there are some big differences between Hasbro and Games Workshop. Hasbro struggles aren't really with their game lines. Wizards of the Coast had a great year last year, in part driven by Warhammer 40k, because, they just released a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards featuring Warhammer 40k, and it was a strong seller by all intents and purposes. But, we can't help but notice that Games Workshop seems to be on the upswing, and Hasbro is just struggling to, tread water. So anyways, what do you think of the new Warhammer tabletop RPG? Is it something that you're interested in trying? Let us know in the comment section, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.